What's going on, guys? I'm Lakota from Meyer Mediums, and this is a reminder that even the greats have made garbage. Stephen King has been one of my favorite authors for years now. You guys have heard me sing his praises in many videos, but I really do believe that he has written some of the greatest stories that this century has seen, and he has been a huge source of inspiration and entertainment for millions of people across the globe. Stephen King has written 63 novels so far, and 30 of those have been #1 bestsellers. So the question is, has he ever written anything bad? And the answer to that is a resounding yes. King has written some borderline unreadable garbage, and today I want to talk about the ones that I believe are the worst offenders. And while I talk about these books, I will, as per usual, be rolling some time-lapse art footage in the background. These pieces are from this year's Halloween series, because if we're going to be talking about Stephen King, we might as well keep it spooky. Let's begin. First, let me say that I have not read all of Stephen King's work. I've read well over half of them, but not all of them. And I have stayed away from certain books that people have told me were absolute turds. For instance, Sleeping Beauties, I think, was panned by pretty much everybody, as well as From a Buick 8. Eventually I'll get to reading them, but the books that I'm going to talk about today are from a pool of books that I genuinely wanted to read and then was ridiculously let down by. Also, this video is going to be riddled with spoilers, so if there's a certain book that you are wanting to read and you don't want ruined for you, I have included timestamps down below, so just go ahead and skip ahead. I've also ranked all of these books from least miserable experience to the biggest disaster, and the book to start off that list is Rose Madder. Rose Madder is the story of Rose McClendon, who is married to an abusive police officer. One day, she decides to just up and leave and start a new life elsewhere. Her husband Norman decides to go after her using his seemingly supernatural gift of finding people, and whenever he finds her, he plans on killing her. While Rose is living her new life in a new town, she stumbles into a pawn shop where she finds love and a painting that really speaks to her. She takes the painting home, and it just so happens that the painting becomes real. Rose gets to go inside of the painting, which is apparently somewhere in Midworld from the Dark Tower series, based on a conversation that they have inside the painting. Anyway, moving on. There are mysterious women inside of this painting, and they send Rose on a quest to rescue a baby from a maze, and it ends in a showdown with a one-eyed bull. Later on in the book, she gets to do the same thing again, except for the bull is her crazy ex-husband and a bovine mask. I didn't hate this book. The story was not that bad. The protagonist felt real, and the antagonist definitely antagonized. There really weren't any inherently annoying characters in the book, and there was honestly a lot that I liked about it, but it just was not as enjoyable as I wanted it to be. And I think it boils down to the fact that it didn't feel like a Stephen King novel. In all honesty, this felt like Stephen King trying to write a Neil Gaiman novel. And to be honest, if Neil Gaiman had written this book, I bet it would have been stellar. I just think the story was too long, which is kind of silly to say because of all the Stephen King books out there that are like longer than the Bible. This one is only 420 pages, but I think it would have been better had it been a novella. I think this book suffered from really long, boring periods of character development where nobody's character actually got developed. Also, there is a clear point after the last showdown in the book where it could have just ended and been fine. But instead, we travel down this weird, seemingly pointless path where Rose starts to develop anger management issues like later on in life. And I'm sure that King was trying to drive home some sort of deep meaning there, but we didn't need it. It was whatever that meaning was, it was completely lost on me. I did not need more of this lady's story after the climax. That's what he said. Really though, I'm surprised that this story has not been adapted to film, because of all of Stephen King's work, I think this book is the most adaptable. If you took out all of the boring garbage that didn't need to be in there anyway, you could have a solid script. I'm genuinely surprised that nobody has made a movie out of Rose Madder. Book number 2 on the list is The Tommyknockers. I cannot adequately express to you how much I wanted to like this book. I had heard a lot of people talking some mad trash on this story, and I refused to hear it because I thought sci-fi horror written by the guy who did It and The Shining Sign me up. What I got instead was a boring slog that just kept going and going and going and going and going. For those of you who don't know, Tommyknockers is the story about a woman named Bobby Anderson who has discovered a buried spaceship in the woods behind her house. But wait! The story is actually about a guy named James Gardner who has discovered that his friend Bobby has discovered a buried spaceship in the woods behind her house. But hold on, because the story's actually about the townspeople who have discovered that James and Bobby have discovered a buried spaceship in the woods behind their house, and then the spaceship, it starts controlling everybody's minds and changing their bodies because it has discovered that everyone has discovered a buried spaceship in the woods behind this house. The most annoying thing is that the story starts off really strong and there's enough mystery that makes you want more. Then you get more and realize that the story has no idea where it's actually going. The story just started going in too many directions. There was something like radiation poisoning, and then people started getting crazy smart and building gadgets far beyond the reach of human knowledge. Then there was alien zombies, a glowing green lab that used people as batteries, and although all of those things sound cool in their own right, it just didn't work. That's all I gotta say about it. It just didn't work. Also, the real aliens look super stupid whenever they show up for the last, 3% of the book. Are there any redeeming qualities to this book? Yes! There was some fun parts. There is a cameo by Pennywise whenever they take a kid to the hospital in Derry, Maine, which is where the story of It takes place. There's also this scene where a kid, I think his name's David, he's affected by this alien gas and it's, making him super smart or whatever. And he decides he's going to put on a magic show. And in the magic show, he does a trick where he makes his little brother disappear. And he makes him disappear for real. He doesn't know where his brother went and he doesn't know how to get him back. And he starts freaking out. And it is heart-wrenching. It is one of the best little pieces in a Stephen King's, in any story that I've ever read. I started choking up because this kid was so distraught and he wrote it so effectively. Overall, though, Tommyknockers is 558 pages of mediocrity. Moving on. Third book on this list is a gem called Finders Keepers. Finders Keepers is the second installment in the Bill Hodges trilogy, which goes Mr. Mercedes, great book. Finders Keepers, hot diarrhea, and then End of Watch, great book. In general, this book didn't even need to happen. It was a pointless story about a book thief who gets put in prison for stealing books, and then a much younger book thief unknowingly steals the original books from the original book thief. Then he goes and tries to sell them to another book thief who tries to extort this new young book thief. And then the original book thief gets out of prison and he's mad about all the book theft that is happening in this book, and he starts hunting down the young protagonist. The kicker here is that this book has almost no tie-in with the first or third book in this series, except for maybe a page and a half at the end, which, let's be honest, could have just been put at the beginning of the third book and saved everybody a lot of time and effort. And for a book that is included in what is called the Bill Hodges trilogy, Bill and his crew don't even show up until 200 pages into the story. Bill Hodges felt like a side character in his own book. So were there any redeeming qualities here? Yes. At least Bill, Holly, and Jerome were in the book, because had they not been, it would have been insufferable to the point of putting it down without finishing it. Secondly, if you're listening to it on Audible, Will Patton does all of the Bill Hodges trilogy and all of the Holly Gibney stories, and he does an immaculate job. In conclusion, if you want to read the Bill Hodges trilogy, you can absolutely skip this book. You gain nothing by reading it. There is no new knowledge that you are not immediately made aware of in book 3, End of Watch. Just skip it. Book number 4 is this steaming pile of fecal ejecta, Cujo. If I'm going to be honest, I was not really that excited to read Cujo to begin with, just because the story premise didn't seem that exciting to me. But it's hailed as one of King's classics, so I thought, I'll give it a shot. Cujo is the story of a horrible monster that lives in the home of Tad and Victor Trenton. Tad is left alone with this monster whenever his father Victor has to go away on business, which ends in Tad being locked inside of a car with this monster until he dies. Also, there is a rabid Saint Bernard that kills people in this story as well. Seriously though, Cujo was just a sick dog, and it was sad to watch his mental decline because of the illness, and while it's true that Cujo mauls and kills people, Donna Trenton is the actual antagonist of this story, and you cannot convince me otherwise. Donna Trenton is the lying, cheating, self-absorbed wife of Victor Trenton and mother to Tad, and this is what King leads with. This is pretty much Donna's introduction. She cheats on her husband with a crazy man, which she regrets, and instead of addressing it, she just decides to ignore it, assuming that the side bro will just disappear. Meanwhile, her inner monologue is constantly complaining about how hard she has it as a stay-at-home mom in this new town. I was really hoping that Donna was going to be one of Cujo's first victims, but unfortunately you are stuck with this negative Nancy until the end of the book, where she is locked inside of her broke-down car with her son Tad, unable to leave because Cujo, the rabid Saint Bernard, is outside waiting to kill them. And when we got to this part, I thought, oh, thank goodness, this is going to be the part where she sacrifices herself to save her son, and will be rid of her character forever, and she'll have slightly redeemed herself. Instead, Tad falls asleep in the hot car, and while he's sleeping, Donna eats the food from his lunchbox and drinks the drink from his lunchbox. And then the heat gets to be too much for Tad, and he has nothing to drink. This is when Donna decides to do something, gets out of the car, runs towards the house, and ends up killing Cujo. And then Tad dies because the heat was just too much. He ends up passing away in the hot car. In all actuality, Victor, the dad, he's the real victim in this story, because he gets to come home from his business trip to find his house trashed by his wife's side piece, and then find out that Donna couldn't do the one job she was left to do, and that was to keep their son alive. So were there any redeeming qualities to this book? I liked that there were segments from Cujo's point of view. I liked being inside the dog's head and hearing his thoughts. The other redeeming quality is that it finally ended. The final book on this list is one that King himself doesn't even like. I thought that the premise sounded interesting, and I wanted to give it a shot, and that book is Dreamcatcher. This novel was as enjoyable as eating a hot dog water popsicle. So what's it about? Basically, some friends go on a hunting trip where there are alien snakes that climb into your butt and take over your body. Dreamcatcher is one of the only books that I have ever started and not been able to finish. It really was that bad. Just like Tommyknockers, this book starts off strong. I got invested early. I really liked the characters. They were very well developed early on. Then King killed off who I thought was the best character out of the bunch before we even really got to know him. And then what starts off as a spooky, secluded cabin story gets interrupted by the military, which is almost never what I want in a horror novel. Like in horror, when the military gets introduced into the story, it all just seems to lose its heart and fall apart for me. And I think that a lot of people would agree. Just keep the military out of horror stories. And I gave up soon after the military got involved and started bombing the woods from planes or helicopters. I don't know. I lost all interest. And it wasn't just that I don't like when the military gets involved in a horror novel. So it started off as a very personal story between friends. And that's what I got invested in. And then all of a sudden that got broken up, shaken up with military coming in. And the story just kind of spiraled. Once Beaver died, he was kind of like the glue that held everyone together. And then he just wasn't there. And then I kind of just quit caring about everybody else. So that's as far as I got. I couldn't tell you much more after the military got involved because I had to put it down. It was just not a fun read. So were there any redeeming qualities to this story? Yeah, there is a section from their childhood where they stand up for a special needs kid named Duddits, or who they call Duddits, and that is really touching and really well written. It reminded me of the type of writing from It or The Body, and I like that, but that's about it. There was a very small section out of the rest of the junk that I read. Alright guys, that's it. That's my list of the 5 worst Stephen King books that I have read so far. I'm sure that many of you will disagree with me, but I think that handful of you will probably agree with most of them. It's not his best work. And that's okay, because you know what? Nobody does good work all the time, although I don't release my bad stuff usually. Maybe I'll make a video about that. Anyway, that's going to do it for today's video, guys. I hope that you enjoyed it, and if you did, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe down below. Let me know down in the comments what you think are King's crappiest novels, and let me know why you disagree or agree with the ones that I picked. You guys have a wonderful week. I'll see you later. Bye.